Greetings to you. We have a continuing lesson on chakras. My name is Russ Hatfield, and Karra, who is behind my shoulder, is my higher dimensional twin soul. She's also a member of Ashtar Command on Hades Base. This lesson is called Chakra Differences Between Dimensions, Part 2, where Chakra continues her class on something most don't realize their importance in maintaining the body's health. For a healer on a higher dimension, this is required learning. On this dimension, it's an elective. In this session, Karra covers the lower chakras of the human body as a prelude to the upper ones done at a later session already posted. This time, she discusses the differences between the sixth dimension and the third dimension, and she gives anyone interested in the ascension process a crucial clue needed for that to happen. One of the keys are the chakras and how fast they rotate, which is something we are able to control on the third dimension with enough intention. Please subscribe if you want at the end of this video to be alerted to future channeling sessions, editorials from Karra and myself, and lessons from the Center for Ascension. And now, Chakra Differences Between Dimensions, Part 2.
Okay, where do we go from here?
Well, I want to do some discussion, if I could, on sixth dimension compared to third dimension and the use of the various chakras between the two dimensions.
Okay.
Now, I think you'd be the person to talk to on that.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very good knowledge on the chakra system.
Yes, and of course I was already waiting for going to ask this question, so I am.
Well, I suppose that's cheating, but okay. We're working this evening on third dimensional use of chakras to a certain point, and that would be to the solar plexus.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly sticking around the base chakra and the second chakra.
Mm-hmm.
That being, of course, due to survival, fear being a main factor in maintaining those to that point.
Okay. First of all, let's look at the root chakra.
Okay.
And compare the third and the sixth dimension. First of all, the third dimension has a spinning cycle that is a lot less and a lot slower than the sixth dimensional, for the obvious reasons. The spirituality awareness involved it reflects in the speed of the chakra. How the chakras open and close, again, also differences occur between the third and the sixth. They tend to open much, much wider, almost to the point of just being a thin circular rhythm on the sixth, whereas on the third, they don't open up anywhere near as close, except for people of extreme spiritual awareness. People like popes, lamas, Buddhas, priests of extreme knowledge. But again, they don't get as wide as they do on normal persons on the sixth dimension. On the sixth dimension, holy people, extreme holy people, their chakras will almost fade into an almost invisible band that is totally imperceptible because they are so open and spiritually aware. We have had, we being my younger sibling and myself, have had experience with people that have chakras that turn into a very thin ribbon due to the fact that our grandmothers like that. Mm-hmm. This normally happens in great states of, for want of a better word, grace, when our grandmother is in between worlds doing what she does best. Her chakra is almost totally invisible. It is my considered belief, and my sister's considered belief, that this is due to the fact that she is in limbo between worlds. Okay, getting back to other differences in chakras in general, but primarily the lower chakras. The rotation is also in a different direction. For example, most people on your planet, their chakras spin left to right. on Sirius, most people, and I say most, spin from right to left. This is not any serious difference. It is more of a genetical and physical difference, but nothing that is of importance. But it is worth noting, as it does affect the equilibrium, as it were. Now, with the more spiritually unenlightened, the chakras rotate very, very slowly and hardly open at all. Some don't even open at all. And the spiritual natures of the chakras and the rotation is also reflected in the instinctual capacity. The more instinctual a person is, the slower the rotation and the opening and the closing is. For example, again, let's go back to my beloved grandmother. Her chakras rotate at very, very high speed and open and close very rapidly and very wide. They can go from a state of rest when she is dormant, where they are rotating fairly rapidly, which is normal for her, to where they are rotating way beyond, trying to think of a phrase, secular sort of rates. Way beyond, let us estimate or guesstimate, at about 1,500 to 2,000 cycles per second. That's very, very high. A normal cycle on the third dimension, let us say a spiritually enlightened person on the third dimension, rotates at about 150 to 200. Big difference. A less spiritually aware or a spiritually underprivileged person, you have to excuse me, I'm being politically correct by the terminology. A less spiritually enlightened person, theirs rotates at maybe 15 to 20 cycles a second. Very, very slow. An average person, theirs will rotate at about between 80 to 100. So you see that there are major differences from somebody that is less instinctual, less anxiety-ridden, to somebody that is more instinctual and more anxiety-ridden. You have some questions? Okay.
Okay, first off, you mentioned spiritual quite heavily throughout this dissertation, and the correlation it has with the speed of the chakras. Now, for someone who is, let's say, reading the page and comes upon this, the question would come about with the terminology of spiritual and the use of the term in everyday life. For example, whether spiritual on sixth dimension equals spirituality on third dimension.
Yes, to a certain extent it does. Spirituality is not believing in a god, gods, goddesses. It's living a life that is in tune with nature, feeling the spiritual vibes that are around them. It's not going and praying every day. It is not being pious or following a particular religion. It is being in tune with nature, where a lot of the spirit elements come from, the spiritual awareness. To be a spiritual person, you don't have to be cloistered away in a monastery or sequestered in a religious facility or walk a religious path, It is being in tune with everyday surroundings, appreciating the beauty of freshly fallen snow, appreciating the sunrise, the sunset, appreciating the existence of life itself, feeling the air, realizing that the cold, harsh air is as much a part of life as the warm, humid air.
So the term "stop and smell the roses" comes into effect at this point.
Yes, very much so. A spiritual person will take the time to talk to a child eye to eye. Get down to the child's eye. A spiritual person will also be very, very harsh. More along the lines of using a kick in the pants when all else fails.
Understandable. Okay. You also bring up the term instinctual. Now, this, of course, would relate to our ancestors who were very instinctual in the matter of survival needs. Now, many of those same traits have genetically passed through to those on the third dimension, but in most people, they've been lessened to a great degree, and others, they're still quite heavily influenced.
No, they're still there. They're still there, they're just changed the environment. An instinctual reaction is a reaction that is necessary for survival. It is instinctual to breathe. But that's not what I'm getting at. The instinctual reaction is, for example, to get defensive when threatened.
Right.
To become aggressive when somebody else is being aggressive, whether it is in mannerism or in wording. To use various defense mechanisms when threatened. People that are very instinctual know exactly if this situation happens, and they use a opposite reaction, they're going to achieve much more effect than they answer fire with fire.
Right. Okay, now the next part is using control of the speed of your chakras. Is it an ability that we're able to develop to speed up our chakras to a higher level through focusing, maybe?
Yes, but okay, let us do a dissertation on that.
Excellent.
In comparison with third and sixth. Okay, the third dimensional chakra rotation of the more spiritually enlightened, as I said, is between 1500 to 2000. Okay. No, sorry. 150 to 200.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm still thinking on the sixth.
All right.
Okay, let's start off with the sixth.
All right.
1500 to 2000 cycles a second.
Okay.
Okay. The reason that the revolutions are so high is that the more spiritually aware in the sixth dimension are closer to being able to shift between spiritual realms, the physical and the spiritual, between the dimensions that they inhabit and lower dimensions. Some are fortunate in being able to do that with the higher dimension, being able to astral travel to the seventh and the eighth dimension, and being able to rotate at a speed that is, even though not that advanced compared to the seventh and the eighth, it is enough for them to maintain the focus. Looking at it, the higher the revolutionary cycle, the more spiritually evolved an individual is. I estimate, again, my grandmother's cycle to be somewhere around about 1600 to 1700, which is very, very fast. It appears that the thinner the rhythm of the chakra once they're fully opened and enlarged, also reflects to the spiritual awareness and the closeness to being able to achieve the change to the seventh. It also ties in with a higher cycle. Having a high cycle of approximately 16 to 1700 cycles a second and a fairly thin chakra rhythm when they're fully open, almost to the point of being imperceptibly visible, and doesn't necessarily dictate that an individual is ready to achieve ascension to a higher level. sometimes it is just the very nature of the spiritual person. What I'm saying is that my grandmother probably unlikely is ready to go to the seventh dimension. However, on the lower dimension, the third dimension, having a cycle that is between 150 to 2000 does open that possibility of ascension to the sixth dimension. Again, with the increase in the opening of the chakra, would also imply that it is more spiritually available to ascension, as is the opposite, or not the opposite, but the difference between the sixth dimension and the third. It doesn't automatically dictate on the third. It means that the potential is much higher than on the sixth. This is because the third, being much more dense and much harder or harsher universe or dimension, makes it much more difficult to achieve the revolutionary cycles and the opening and closing of chakras with such a wide difference. But also in the nature of chakras, the similarity being that they're used very much for the same purpose. The purpose of freeing up the instinctual ability and the spiritual awareness for advancement, in being able to achieve the secular increase. It is also able to achieve a more rapid spiritual learning. Mm-hmm. But one of the difficulties concerning involving emotional status is that sometimes as the revolutionary speed increases and the opening of the chakra becomes wider, it also sometimes can make an individual very emotionally erratic. Not so much in the ability going from one extreme to the other or from a high to a low. It means that it is hard to plot a emotional stability. That the roller coaster ride, whilst the peaks may be very, very long and the troughs very, very long to get there, there is a definite disadvantage to being emotionally erratic. However, there are individuals that do advance and their cycles increase in the rotational speed up to 200 cycles a second. And they do run from wide that are very, very emotionally stable, almost emotionally devoid, although they do have emotions, but they are hidden and controlled. One individual that springs to mind is the Dalai Lama. My favorite individual that springs to mind is a matter of fact. Okay.
Okay. Well, you answered two questions there. One, you mentioned it was going on third dimension from 152,000. I assume you meant 200.
Yes.
Okay. And the other is, I had assumed that the denseness, as you mentioned, of third dimension would be the difficulty in speeding up the chakra.
Mm-hmm.
But the chakras, as far as I know, have no mass.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that they're affected by the denseness of a dimension?
And because they are physical. They're not just spiritual.
Oh.
Or even spiritual is physical. But it is a different kind of physical. Something doesn't have to be seen to be physical.
So they are controlled by what?
By the body.
Okay.
You see, that is the answer to your next question. How does the physical body affect the chakras?
Right.
Because of the movement of the body through the denseness of the third dimension affects the rotation speed of the chakras. that are physical but not visible.
Hmm. So,
You get it, don't you?
yeah, I've seen that the spiritual part of nature, as you say,
Mhm.
as we go through and we experience it, it speeds up our chakras.
Right.
But sitting around watching TV and being devoid of that spirituality
Mhm.
maintains the chakras at the lower level.
Right.
Okay. Now, what about in churches where many people have gathered and in a religious, in their sense, gathering? Are they automatically raising each other's
No.
chakras?
No, it doesn't quite work that way.
Okay.
When third-dimensional beings gather in a church, most are feeling that they've got to fulfill an obligation,
Right.
negative emotion, fulfilling a obligation. They really don't want to be there, but they have to be, as they are involved in a religious organization, and that they feel that they have to go and pray to their God in their religious facility. So it is an obligation.
Well, if we're getting too much trouble here, well, there was one in Oregon that was something that was more of a thing where people wanted to be at than just were kind of forced to be at or had to obligated to be at.
Yeah. If it is more wanting to, and everybody wants to, yes, the increase does happen.
Oh, excellent.
Having talked to Mark today, as I'm sure you're aware, one of the things that I did ask him about was the Druid religion that he's involved in.
Oh, yes.
And that their churches are all outside.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
And most Druids, from the opportunities that I've had to analyze and watch, are more spiritually in tune, and their chakras do rotate at a much higher frequency than most people because they don't feel obligated, and they're surrounded by their church whenever they go outside. So that they're always at church. So, as a rule, the Druids tend to be more spiritually enlightened than people that are in an organized, one day a week religion, paying homage to a deity that they feel obligated to.
I see. Okay.
Now, I'm deliberately choosing my words very carefully because I am walking a tightrope.
Good call. Now, the benefits of an open and more rapidly spinning chakra. Health, well-being, so on.
Yes. There are health and well-being, most certainly, but also health is not just a chakra thing. A chakra will continue to spin at a higher rate in a more spiritually aware person, even if they are in poor health, even though their chakra will slow down. In comparison to normal, everyday third-dimensional people, it will continue to rotate at a higher frequency.
I'm sure we could spend hours on just chakras alone.
Oh, most certainly. Most certainly in the effects that they have.
We still haven't gotten anything higher than the solar type wave.
No. I will add that the standard rotational speed of chakras vary from chakra to chakra.
Okay.
1,500 to 2,000 are the lower chakras. That's an average between the two. If we go up higher to the heart, the brow, and the crown, or the throat chakra, you will see a wild difference.
Wow.
Yeah, the crown chakra on my grandmother rotates at about 16 to 19,000. per second.
Wow.
And the top end of the more spiritually aware individuals that are closer to their jump are about 25 to 30,000 cycles a second.
And when you get to the higher dimensions, for example, Amal, his chakras would spin at probably like 30, 35,000?
Lower ones probably, and guesstimating at that point.